The late afternoon sun hung low over a quiet stretch of countryside, painting the sky in warm streaks of orange and gold. The Tulane Road wound through miles of open farmland, bordered by green fields and the occasional line of trees rustling in a soft breeze. It was the kind of peaceful setting that usually soothed the soul, but for Charles Beaumont, peace was the last thing on his mind. His silver Mercedes GLE 350 sat, lopsided on the gravel shoulder, front left tire completely flat. He stood beside it, arms folded tightly across his chest, fuming. His perfectly tailored gray suit clung to him in the summer heat. A silk tie, now loosened, dangled from his neck like a noose. His Italian leather shoes were dusted with dirt, a detail that annoyed him more than it should have. Charles glanced at his smartwatch. No signal. Again. Damn it, he muttered under his breath. He tried waving his phone above his head like a makeshift antenna, holding out hope. Still nothing. Not a bar of service. His voicemail had already picked up a dozen missed calls. His afternoon meeting with the Singapore investor group was now completely shot. $1 million deal at risk, all because of one stupid tire. He looked around. No buildings, no towns, no people. Just the endless hum of the wind brushing across the tall grass and the rhythmic clinking of cooling metal from the car's engine. He had passed a gas station almost 10 miles back, but there hadn't been a single sign of civilization since. And no traffic now, just empty road and silence. Charles reached back into the car and pulled out the owner's manual, flipping through it with irritation. He found the section on changing tires, but rolled his eyes. I pay people to do this, he muttered, slamming the glove box shut. He opened the trunk and stared at the contents. A small, unused jack, an emergency triangle, and a factory fresh spare. He sighed. He hadn't changed a tire in 20 years, maybe more, and he certainly didn't plan on learning how in a $6,000 suit. Just then, a car passed on the opposite side of the road. Charles raised his hand, trying to flag it down, but the driver barely glanced his way before continuing down the empty road. Unbelievable, he hissed, brushing dust from his jacket sleeve. This is ridiculous. He paced a few feet, then kicked at a stone near the tire, frustration boiling over. A sudden sharp pain shot through his foot, and he cursed again, hopping slightly on one leg. I should have taken the jet like I always do, he muttered. He leaned against the hood, rubbing his temple. He could already hear the board back in Chicago asking questions. Why weren't you at the call, Charles? What happened to your bulletproof schedule? The truth that he was stranded on a nameless country road with no cell service and a flat tire sounded more like a punchline than an excuse. From the corner of his eye, he noticed something approaching. Not a car, a bicycle. It was old, rusted, and creaked slightly with each turn of the pedals. Riding it was a young black boy, maybe 11 or 12 years old. Backpack over one shoulder. Worn sneakers. T-shirt faded from too many washes. As he pedaled closer, the boy slowed, eyes focused on the lopsided SUV and the sharply dressed man beside it. He coasted to a stop a few feet away. Flat, the boy asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Charles looked him over, mildly surprised. He didn't expect anyone to be out here, let alone a kid on a bike. Yeah, Charles replied cautiously. Can't get a signal either. Great combination. The boy nodded, kicking down his bike stand. I can help. Charles blinked. You know how to change a tire? Yep. Changed my aunt's last week. Yours has a full-size spare, right? Charles looked back at the trunk, hesitated, then nodded. Apparently. The boy walked over confidently, his voice calm but assured. Pop the trunk for me? Charles hesitated again, then shrugged. At this point, what did he have to lose? He pressed the button and stepped aside. The boy got to work without hesitation. He pulled the jack from the trunk, examined it, then crouched near the flat tire. You parked it good, flat surface, not on a slope. That helps. You ever change a tire before? Charles let out a dry laugh. In college. That was a long time ago. No worries. Just need to loosen the bolts before I jack it up. Otherwise it spins in place. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his own ratchet set. It was small but well-used. Stickers and faded marker scribbles covered the case. Charles raised an eyebrow. You carry that with you? The boy shrugged. Always. Never know when someone might need help. Something about the statement struck Charles. He found himself watching the boy more closely now. His hands were dirty but precise, moving with care and familiarity. There was no hesitation in what he did. He wasn't showing off. He just knew how to fix things. Charles felt a strange sensation, one he rarely experienced: respect. What's your name, kid? Jalen, the boy replied, glancing up for a second. You. Charles. Jalen nodded politely. Nice to meet you, Charles. Charles smirked at the lack of sir. It felt refreshingly honest. You live around here? He asked. Jalen pointed toward a barely visible path between two fields. Couple miles that way. My grandma's place. Charles nodded slowly, watching him continue to loosen the bolts, sweat glistening on his forehead under the sun. The kid had grit and skills and confidence, more than some of the interns at Charles's company. He looked around again at the empty road, then back at Jalen. Somehow, the silence no longer felt threatening. For the first time that day, Charles felt like maybe, just maybe, this breakdown wasn't the disaster he thought it was. And little did he know, this boy on a bike was about to change the course of his life forever. Jalen worked with the calm precision of someone who'd done this a dozen times before. His knees were dusty, and the worn denim of his jeans was smudged with grease, but he didn't seem to care. The boy's hands were steady, his focus unwavering as he loosened the last lug nut. Charles stood just to the side, arms crossed but no longer with the impatient energy he had carried earlier. Now he was watching, really watching. Jalen placed the loosened nuts in a neat little pile near the jack and gave the wheel a small tug. It resisted at first. He rocked it slightly, repositioned his grip, then gave it a strong pull. The wheel popped free, wobbling slightly before he steadied it with both hands and rolled it to the side like he'd done this since he could walk. Charles was impressed. He didn't say it out loud, at least not yet, but he felt it deeply. Most grown men, he knew, didn't even know where to find the jack, much less how to use it properly. How old are you? Charles finally asked, unable to hide his curiosity. 12. Jalen replied casually, brushing his hands on the sides of his jeans. 13 in November. 13, Charles echoed, almost himself. You sure don't act like a 12-year-old. Jalen gave a small grin, then positioned the spare tire against the hub and began tightening the nuts by hand. Grew up around my uncle's repair shop. He let me help out after school, taught me stuff. Said it's good to know how to fix your own problems. Smart man, Charles said, a little quieter now. There was a long pause between them, broken only by the soft clicking of the ratchet, as Jalen began tightening the lug nuts in a crisscross pattern. Like a true pro, the sun had dropped a little lower, casting long shadows across the road. A bird chirped nearby, but otherwise the place was silent. Charles adjusted his jacket and crouched down beside him. Mind if I help? Jalen looked up, a little surprised. Sure. You can hold the tires steady while I torque it. It wasn't much, but it was something. Charles knelt next to the boy, his knees popping slightly in protest. He reached out and held the tire in place while Jalen finished tightening each bolt, ensuring they were all snug. For a few minutes, there were no CEO titles, no millionaire egos, no Rolexes, tailored suits, or Harvard degrees. Just two people, one young, one older, working together to solve a simple problem. When they were done, Jalen leaned back on his heels, wiped his brow, and smiled. You're good to go. Charles stood slowly, brushing the dust from his slacks. That's it. Jalen nodded. Yep, just take it easy on the spare. It's not meant for long drives. Charles chuckled. I'll get it replaced first thing tomorrow. He looked down at Jalen, a strange feeling of humility settling in his chest. You didn't have to stop. Why did you? Jalen looked up at him, thoughtful. Because you looked like you needed help. And, I don't know, my grandma always says, if you're able to help someone, you should. Charles let the words sit with him. It was such a simple idea, yet profoundly uncommon, especially in the high-stakes, cutthroat world he came from. You're a smart kid, Jalen. You got a good head on your shoulders. Jalen smiled but said nothing. Where are you headed now? Charles asked, glancing at the old bike leaning against a tree. Home, Jalen replied. Got some chores to finish before dinner. My grandma's making stew. Charles reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, holding it out to him. Here, for your time. And the help. Jalen hesitated. He looked at the bill, then at Charles, and shook his head slowly. Thanks, but I didn't do it for money. Charles blinked. Seriously? Jalen nodded. I'm good. The man stared at him for a moment, surprised. A 12-year-old just turned down $100 without hesitation. That didn't happen, not in his world. Charles said, folding the bill and tucking it back into his wallet, you're exactly the kind of kid I'd want working for me someday. Jalen grinned. You'd have to teach me to wear suits, though. I'm not good with ties. Charles laughed, the sound deep and genuine. It had been a long time since something made him laugh like that. Deal, he said, but you've got to keep that attitude. Never lose that. It's rare. Jalen stood and grabbed his bike. I won't. Promise. Charles looked at him one last time before opening his car door. Jalen, yeah, you've got potential. Don't let the world tell you otherwise. Jalen nodded, then pedaled off down the road, his figure getting smaller and smaller as he disappeared into the golden light of early evening. Charles sat in the car for a moment before starting the engine. The dashboard lit up, the air conditioner clicked on, and the Bluetooth automatically connected, finally showing signal bars on the display. Missed calls, emails, alerts, but he ignored them all. Instead, he stared out the windshield, thinking about a boy who showed up on a bike, changed a tire, and refused to take money for it. A kid who knew how to fix things, not just machines, but moments. Charles shifted the car into drive and eased back onto the road, a strange smile on his face. Something had shifted inside him. Something subtle, but real. He didn't know it yet, but that short roadside encounter had just sparked the beginning of something far greater for both of them. It had been 3 days since Charles Beaumont met the boy on the bike Jalen. 3 days since a 12-year-old kid had humbled a millionaire. Back in his Chicago penthouse, the view of the skyline from the floor-to-ceiling windows usually felt like a trophy. But this morning, Charles couldn't stop thinking about something far smaller than the city stretching out before him. Jalen. He sipped his black coffee, staring at his untouched breakfast. Usually, his mornings were methodical. He reviewed earnings reports, checked international markets, answered priority emails, and met with department heads. Today, all of that sat in his inbox, ignored. The truth was simple. Jalen had impressed him more than any intern or executive assistant in recent memory. Not just because of how quickly and confidently the boy had changed a tire, but because of who he was underneath, kind, composed, helpful, and humble. A kid who knew his worth but didn't feel the need to flaunt it. A kid who had nothing and yet gave everything he had. Charles couldn't shake the feeling. It wasn't guilt. It was possibility. He pulled out his phone and opened a notepad app. A title sat at the top, Project Roadside. It was a scribbled idea he had typed up the night after getting back into the city. A new corporate initiative, find and fund promising kids from underserved communities, not through charity, through mentorship, investment, tools. He tapped the screen, adding a new note. Jalen, first candidate. Find him. That same day, 200 miles away, Jalen sat on the porch of his grandmother's small house. The front yard was dotted with patches of wild grass and 2 old chairs, one of which rocked slowly in the breeze. Jalen was hunched over an old Chromebook, watching a video titled, How to Build a Wind Turbine from Recycled Materials. Beside him, his grandmother, Mama Ray, knitted quietly. She wore a faded pink house dress and large square glasses, and she could tell her grandson was deep in thought. What ya working on, baby? Jalen didn't look up, trying to figure out if I can build a small wind generator for the back shed. The power bill was high last month. Ray paused her knitting and looked at him with a soft smile. You don't need to worry about all that, Jay. But I want to, he said. I can figure it out. If I can just, before he could finish, a sleek black SUV pulled into the gravel driveway. The engine cut off and the door opened. Out stepped Charles Beaumont. Jalen froze. He looked at his grandma, then back at Charles. The man was no longer wearing his business suit, just jeans and a navy polo shirt. But there was no mistaking him. "Afternoon," Charles said, walking up the steps slowly, unsure if he was doing the right thing. Jalen stood up, shocked. Hey, what are you doing here?" Charles smiled. "Had a flat. Thought maybe you'd help again." Jalen gave a shy laugh. "You serious?" "Half," Charles replied. "Other half, I just wanted to see if we could talk." Mama Ray stood up slowly, watching carefully. Charles removed his sunglasses and extended a hand. "Ma'am, I'm Charles Beaumont." "I know who you are," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "I watch the business news. Thought I recognized you from somewhere. You're the one with the tech empire." Charles chuckled modestly. "I prefer entrepreneur, but yes." He turned to Jalen. "I meant what I said, kid. You've got potential." Jalen shifted his weight awkwardly. "I mean, thanks, but I'm just a kid from nowhere." Charles looked him dead in the eye. That's where all the best people come from. A silence passed between them. Mama Ray narrowed her eyes. "So, what exactly are you doing here, Mr. Beaumont?" Charles took a breath. "I'm starting something new. A program. A mentorship pipeline. For kids like Jalen, smart, capable, but overlooked. I want to invest in them the way venture capital invests in ideas." Ray folded her arms. "And what's in it for you?" Charles looked around at the modest porch, the worn siding on the house, the cracked cement path leading to the front door. "To be honest," he said, "I'm tired of building things that only benefit people like me. I want to build something that matters." That caught her attention. Jalen looked from his grandmother to Charles, unsure of what to say. No one had ever shown this kind of interest in him. Not a teacher, not a neighbor, definitely not a millionaire. "I want to offer you a chance," Charles continued. "Mentorship, resources, a proper laptop, engineering kits, online courses. When you're ready, maybe an internship. Not as a favor, but because you've earned it." Jalen's eyes widened. "Internship?" "At my company," Charles said, "we need minds like yours." Jalen looked at his grandma, who said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You really want to help him, you better stick to your word. Because if you don't, I'll come find you." Charles held up his hand. "I swear." That evening, Jalen sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the brand new laptop Charles had dropped off before leaving. It still had the plastic wrap on the screen. He opened it slowly. Inside was a note typed and taped to the keyboard. "Every empire starts with one brick. You've already laid yours." CB Jalen read it 3 times. Then he smiled, opened a blank document, and began to write. Project. Wind turbine version 1.0. 3 months passed, and the world kept turning, but for Jalen, everything had changed. His days still began the same: early mornings, helping his grandma around the house, biking to the store, checking on neighbors. But his evenings? Entirely different now. After dinner, Jalen disappeared into the old shed behind the house, a dusty wooden structure that once stored tools and broken lawnmowers. Now, thanks to a few upgrades from Charles Beaumont's team, it had become something else, his own miniature lab. A second-hand workbench had been installed, along with LED lights, a soldering station, and a few refurbished computers. There were circuit boards stacked in bins, wires hanging from hooks, and printouts of YouTube diagrams and wiring schematics pinned to a corkboard. The walls were still warped from years of rain and wind, but to Jalen, it might as well have been NASA. And the project that started it all, the wind turbine, was nearly complete. He was building it from salvage parts: a broken ceiling fan, repurposed bicycle wheels, PVC pipe blades, and an old alternator. It wasn't pretty, but it was efficient. He had already tested it on a small stand by the fence, where it powered an LED light strip during the night. Next version gets a battery system, he whispered to himself one night, sketching ideas in a notebook. Inside, pinned to the wall above his desk, was Charles's original note. Every empire starts with one brick. You've already laid yours. Jalen looked at it every day. It reminded him this wasn't just tinkering. This was building something bigger. Meanwhile, in downtown Chicago, Charles Beaumont stood before a glass conference table in his 53rd floor boardroom. The city glittered behind him, but his mind wasn't on stock charts or quarterly earnings. He was preparing a presentation, a different kind of pitch. This is more than PR, he told the room of executives. This is about building the next generation of problem solvers, starting with one we already found. He clicked the remote. A photo of Jalen appeared on the screen, kneeling next to the Mercedes, ratchet in hand, eyes full of focus. 12 years old. No training. No resources. Just YouTube, curiosity, and heart. There were murmurs around the table. I'm offering him a full scholarship pipeline, STEM programs, mentorship, and direct access to our labs. And if he stays on track, he gets a summer internship at headquarters before he even finishes high school. One executive raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. What if he's not ready? Charles smiled. I'm not worried about whether he's ready. I'm worried whether we are. The next weekend, Charles made the drive back out to Jalen's hometown. No suits this time, just jeans and a hoodie. He pulled into the driveway of the small house and stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase and a slim, metal case tucked under his arm. Jalen was already outside, bike leaning against the shed, wiping his hands with a rag. Charles, he called out with a grin. Thought you forgot about me. Not a chance, Charles replied. Mama Ray came out to the porch, nodding toward him. You still keepin' your promises, Mr. Beaumont? Trying to, he said with a smile. He followed Jalen to the shed. As the door opened, Charles was stunned by what he saw. You've been busy, he said. Jalen gave a humble shrug. Made some upgrades. Charles walked slowly around the space, examining the turbine parts, the notes, the neat tool wall. This is real engineering. You could be designing test models at my company right now. Jalen raised an eyebrow. No way. Way, Charles replied, handing him the slim metal case. Jalen unlatched it carefully. Inside, a tablet, top of the line, loaded with engineering software, simulation tools, and virtual lessons from MIT, Stanford, and NASA. Jalen's jaw dropped. This is insane. You've earned it, Charles said, and there's more. He opened the leather briefcase and pulled out a crisp folder labeled Beaumont Innovation Fellowship. This is an official agreement. It's not a job offer, not yet, but it guarantees you mentorship, resources, and a summer internship in 2 years if you keep doing what you're doing. And when you graduate high school, there's a full-ride scholarship with your name on it, STEM, any field, anywhere. Jalen stared at him. Why are you doing this? Charles leaned against the workbench, folding his arms. Because when I was 12, nobody saw me. I see you, Jalen. And because you didn't ask for money, you asked for nothing. You helped me because it was the right thing to do. That kind of character is rare. Jalen's voice was quiet. I don't know what to say. Say, you'll keep going, Charles replied. Say, you'll prove us both right. Jalen nodded slowly. I will. Charles extended a hand. Then we've got a deal. They shook hands. For a moment, everything felt still, the breeze, the sun, the soft hum of distant cicadas. It wasn't just a handshake. It was a passing of the torch. That night, Jalen sat in his room, staring at the tablet screen. He had opened a 3D modeling app and was already redesigning the turbine housing to be more aerodynamic. He couldn't sleep. Not because he was nervous, but because for the first time in his life, he saw the path in front of him clearly. He didn't just want to fix things anymore. He wanted to build the world he wished existed. And now, someone believed he could. For years later, the bright, modern lobby of Beaumont Tech HQ buzzed with excitement. Interns in branded hoodies tapped away at tablets. Digital displays showcased futuristic product launches, AI breakthroughs, and clean energy tech. A banner stretched across the atrium, Future Innovators Summit, celebrating the next generation of genius. In the center of it all stood a tall, confident young man, Jalen. Now 16, Jalen was barely recognizable from the boy who once pedaled a rusted bike to fix a stranger's flat tire. His hair was a little longer, his frame lean but strong, and he carried himself with a quiet authority. Today, he wasn't just attending the summit, he was the keynote speaker. He stood at the edge of the event stage, adjusting the collar of his slim black blazer. He wore sneakers instead of dress shoes, and under the blazer was a custom t-shirt that read, "Fixing a flat changed my life." Behind him, a giant screen displayed side-by-side images, one of young Jalen crouched beside Charles's SUV. The other, present-day Jalen holding a prototype battery unit he had helped design for off-grid communities. A tech journalist whispered into her mic nearby, "Jalen R. Taylor, at just 16, has developed 3 working prototypes of renewable energy systems using salvage materials and is now the youngest intern ever at Beaumont Tech Labs." From across the room, Charles Beaumont watched with quiet pride. The same Charles, still sharp in a tailored suit, but softer around the edges now. He stood beside Mama Ray, who had come up from the country in her best Sunday dress and pearls. "He's come a long way," Charles said, smiling. "He's just getting started," Mama Ray replied. On stage, the crowd quieted as Jalen took the stage. He approached the podium, looked down for a moment, then up. 4 years ago, I didn't have Wi-Fi at home. I didn't have access to labs or mentors or scholarships. But I had curiosity. I had YouTube. And I had a wrench. Soft laughter from the audience. One afternoon, I saw a man stranded on the side of the road. His car had a flat tire. He didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who he was. But I stopped. I helped. And that moment changed everything. He paused, letting the silence hang just long enough to hit. That man was Charles Beaumont. And he didn't just thank me, he saw something in me. Something I hadn't even seen in myself yet. Applause swelled through the room. I stand here today, not because of luck, but because of opportunity. Because someone powerful didn't just donate money to a cause, he invested in a kid. More applause. Jalen clicked the remote in his hand. The screen behind him shifted to show a diagram of his latest project, a modular microgrid system designed to power off-grid villages using nothing but wind and solar. He explained the tech in clear, simple terms, no flash, just facts. He didn't pitch, he educated. Backstage, as Jalen walked off stage, people swarmed to shake his hand. Journalists, executives, students. He smiled, nodded, but his eyes searched for one person. Charles was already waiting. "You killed it," he said, clapping Jalen on the back. "Thanks," Jalen grinned. "I was nervous. Couldn't tell. I've been practicing in my grandma's shed." They both laughed, the memory still vivid between them. That dusty shed had become a birthplace. Charles handed him a sleek white envelope with gold trim. "What's this?" Jalen asked. "Just open it." Jalen peeled it open, pulling out a thick letter. At the top, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, admission letter. Jalen blinked. His hands trembled slightly. "They accepted me?" "They didn't just accept you. They're giving you a full ride, plus a research grant. You'll start as a freshman next fall, with sophomore standing." Jalen couldn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the letter, his mind racing. "You earned this," Charles said softly. "This isn't charity. This is the return on an investment I'll never regret." Jalen finally looked up. "I'm not going to waste it." "I know you won't." Later that night, as the event wound down, Charles and Jalen stood outside on the rooftop patio, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. "You remember what I said the day we met?" Charles asked. Jalen smirked. "That you hadn't changed a tire in 20 years? Charles laughed. "Okay, besides that." Jalen nodded. "You said I had potential. That I shouldn't let the world tell me otherwise." Charles turned to him. "You proved me right. But more importantly, you proved yourself right." Jalen looked out at the skyline, his face calm, steady. "I want to do the same for other kids," he said. "There are 1,000 Jalens out there, working hard, fixing things going unseen. I want to find them." Charles smiled. "Then let's build a program. Together." "Really? Really? You helped me that day. without asking for anything. Now, I'm giving you the same chance to help someone else. Jalen held out his hand. Deal. Epilogue. 6 months later, the Jalen R. Taylor Fellowship launched. Its mission: to discover and empower young engineers, tinkerers, and problem solvers from underrepresented communities. Its motto: one tire, one moment, one future. From roadside to boardroom, the journey wasn't about where he started, it was about who he chose to become. And he never forgot. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness is the spark that lights an empire.